I'm sorry, Mr. Reichert.
That's okay, Mr. Doggett. Ambassador, thank you for being here today, and welcome to Jeffrey and CJ. I look forward to working with all of you and your team. I know that you and I have a few shared priorities, including successfully updating NAFTA and combating unfair trade practices. And as I said, I want to continue to work with you to accomplish both. In doing so, we should build upon our work done during tax reform to boost the competitiveness of American workers and businesses. Even though I'm very appreciative of your, as some has defined, unconventional approach, I still have concerns about several actions that have been taken by the administration that I believe could undermine the good work that we've accomplished through the tax reform effort. To successfully update NAFTA, our farmers and manufacturers require certainty. You're keenly aware of that, and accountability. They need to know their investments will be protected and the agreement will be enforced. They need to know that they can rely on this agreement. In targeting unfair trade practices, we must take a targeted approach and work in cooperation with our global partners. We cannot take actions that put our consumers, manufacturers, and exporters at risk. I am deeply troubled by the questions that remain with Section 232 exclusion process and the possibility of tariffs from Section 301 investigation. It is American manufacturers and consumers that will be hurt by an ineffective exclusion process and the placement of tariffs on imports. I implore you to think about my constituents, for example, the family in Maple Valley who will face higher prices, the manufacturer in Auburn who will pay more or who lose access to imported parts, and the apple exporter in Wenatchee who will suffer from retaliation. We must also begin to focus on opening markets. As our trading partners move forward without us, our farmers, workers, and businesses fall behind. Whether it's dairy, wine, potatoes, wheat, or tree fruit, Washington's producers will lose market share in their, to their foreign competitors without new trade agreements. Trade agreements ensure Washington's businesses are treated fairly and can sell their high-quality products around the world. I believe the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement is an example of a successful agreement for America and for the state of Washington. I do agree with you, however, that Korea's implementation of the agreement has been disappointing and that any remaining issues related to Korea's implementation need to be resolved quickly. I am glad to see the Chorus committee system being used for this purpose. Of course, the downside to using the joint committee is that there is less transparency surrounding these discussions. Maybe with Jeffrey and CJ's help, we can lend some transparency to the process. So I recommend and would strongly suggest, Mr. Ambassador, that USTR publish detailed negotiating objectives in Chorus to signal to the public the changes that you are seeking within that agreement and those talks. Can you comment on the transparency of the process and maybe providing those detailed negotiating objectives? Do you have a timeline on that?
Well, first of all, I agree that Chorus is an important agreement. On the issue of transparency, I guess I would say since we're not using TPA, we don't have that statutory umbrella. What I've tried to do is, to the extent possible, talk to members, and I'm happy to talk to any members individually or in groups to talk about this. It's not always a good idea to talk openly about negotiating objectives and certainly negotiating tactics. But from the point of view of the United States, we are troubled by implementing a whole variety of implementing issues. We are troubled by the speed with which some tariffs are going to come off on important products in the automotive industry, but also in others. We have issues with currency. We have a variety of issues. I'm happy to talk to members about this. In terms of publishing something, it's probably unlikely that I'm going to do it. My hope is that what we will do is talk privately to members and have some kind of an agreement in principle quickly. My objective is to try to do this as quickly as possible with as little disruption as possible. And it really is why we decided we were better off limiting what we were going to do, not go through the TPA process and overload the system, and just try to work with members and deal with this on a smaller level in a smaller way than a normal big agreement would be. But to the extent members view themselves as not knowing what our specific objectives are, I'm happy to talk to members and look forward to doing that. My hope is this is a process. It comes to a conclusion fairly quickly, because I think it's having negative effects in a lot of different ways.